And that is not any kind of reverse psychology or trickery. It is a glorious book. I have been more encouraged from the book of Job now than I have in the past, and I'm glad to be going through it. We're in chapter 30. Let me get my notes here. In chapter 29, we saw Job looking at the good old days. Remember, he was considering, oh, how was my life so great before my tragedy? My life was so much better before the suffering, before my children died, my servants died, my camels were robbed from me, the Sabaeans came, the Chaldeans came and ransacked my property. Life was so much better. Oh, I want those good old days, right? That was 29. And in 30, it's the same speech. He just moves from the past into the present. And he is utterly miserable. The sermon title is the point of the sermon today. How to be miserable. If you want to be miserable, focus on the present. That's the lesson of Job 30. It is that simple. The sufferer, if the sufferer wants to increase his misery, all he has to do is look at the present and nothing else. That is enough. There is no stronger guarantee to increase your trouble than to only look at your present circumstances. And we do it a lot. It imprisons us to the present. We think there's no future. We judge God by what is going on in the present. We forget about past faithfulness. We even are blind to present mercies. But that is what Job 30 is about. Let me look at my present circumstances, Job says, and let me look at who's wronged me, what they've said, and how that's impacted me. That's what he does. This is what we do. This is what we do. Of course, it's not just about the present or the past or the future. It's dwelling on the past, present, or future and forgetting God. Just looking at what goes on around you and just forgetting God. It is encountering a trial and judging the circumstances that you are presently in and forgetting to pack the bag of faith. This is the fundamental quality of life for the Christian. Living by faith. Not by what people say, what they do, what you do, inadvertently, purposefully, anything. A writer I go to frequently just because he's really punchy, really, I don't mean convicting, although he is that, just very succinct. His name's Maurice Roberts. He's a minister. I think he's dead now. Was a minister in England. Wrote a couple books, good books. He says this about faith. The marvelous power of faith is that it turns all that would otherwise discourage us into occasions of fresh hope and new confidence in the power of God. I'll just read it real quickly again. The marvelous power of faith is that it turns all that would otherwise discourage us into occasions of fresh hope and new confidence in the power of God. So when we're talking about being under trial, being under tragedy or suffering, we are also simultaneously talking about our circumstances and our life of faith. Do we believe? It is an indictment on ourselves when we give up hope because we think the power of God is not sufficient in my circumstances. And people are speaking louder than God speaking. And what they say matters more than what God says. So today is a lesson on how to be miserable. We're not going to conclude with that. That would be a terrible sermon. But we're going to walk through Job's passage, Job's speech in chapter 30, and then we're going to make a couple of concluding application points of faith. But by and large, this is our twofold problem shown in chapter 30. We focus on present circumstances, and we don't really have a thought about God in it. And if we do, it's usually a wrong thought about God. So how to be miserable? First, point number one, the audacity of who? The audacity of who? 30 verse 1 through 8 reads, "But now they laugh at me, men who are younger than I, whose fathers I would have disdained to set with the dogs of my flock. What could I gain from the strength of their hands, men whose vigor is gone? Through want and hard hunger, they gnaw the dry ground by night in waste and desolation. They pick saltwort and the leaves of bushes and the roots of the broom tree for their food. They are driven out from human company. They shout after them as after a thief. In the gullies of the torrents they must dwell, in holes of the earth and of the rocks. Among the bushes they bray. Under the nettles they huddle together. A senseless, a nameless brood. They have been whipped out of the land." A little bit of gear shift from chapter 29 to chapter 30. He was thinking about his good old days, and now he considers his present circumstances, and he thinks about the who. Who is in his life that is making his life so miserable? And their audacity. He is astonished to see who his mockers are. At present, the mockers are just the dregs of society. Just the absolute worst. Just a rabble of fools. And they are so audacious in their speaking of Job, because of who Job is, a godly, righteous man who, according to chapter 29 and previous chapters, was a blessing to the community, a wise man, a man who entered the room and commanded the attention of everybody else. The youth would flee and play their games elsewhere, and even the aged and elderly would rise up and stand up to listen to the great words of Job, right? And now what's going on? He's thinking about his present circumstances, and he's saying, look at these riffraff. And they are mocking me. And he's incensed about it. They are younger men, younger than Job, verse 1. And they should respect him, but they don't. They mock him. They are people whose fathers Job would not have even given command with the dogs of his flock. As in, he wouldn't have insulted their fathers so much to be dogs with the flock of his herds. That would be an insult. He would never have done that. And yet, these men are mocking Job. They are young men, verse 2, but they're useless men because their vigor is gone. If young men should have anything, it's vigor, it's vitality, and they don't even have that, so they're useless. They are poor and beggarly. They eat what no one wants. Verse 3 and 4, there's this picture of they have want, right? They lack. They're hungry. They gnaw the dry ground. This picture of like a shrew or a mouse gnawing away at a root. They gnaw the dry ground by night in waste and desolation. They don't live in cities. They're outcasts. They live in the dry riverbeds, the wadis. And they pick saltwort, a bush that is useful for nothing. It's so salty, no one eats it unless in the most dire circumstances. And the broom tree, they use the broom tree's roots as charcoal to create fire and eat their food with. They are using the wilderness as a home. They are outcasts. of society. They are shooed away and pushed away like a thief, verse 5. They're driven away from human company. They're subhuman. They don't even deserve to be in the company of people. They live, verse 6, in the torrents, these dry riverbeds where flash floods would come and wipe everything out. This is where they make their home, in the holes of the earth and the rocks. One commentator paraphrases verse 6 by saying, by making their homes in the caves and the holes of the earth, they live in the most horrible of valleys. They're like Golem. Just nasty, ugly little buggers. Live in these caves. They bray like donkeys, cry out like donkeys, live under these nettles and bushes, and they are summarized as a senseless and nameless brood. Senseless, they're fools. The Hebrew word there would be found in the narratives of the kings in David, Nabal. What does his name mean? Fool. And so they are senseless, they are foolish. And on top of that, they are even nameless. To have a name in the ancient Near East is to have a name that is connected to your character, right? Nabal is a fool, so he's called fool. Adam is called Adam because he comes from the Adamah, the ground, the dust, right? Noah is called Noah because he was expected to give rest. Noah, rest. And they're nameless. They have no name. They're not even worthy of a name. Not even a bad name. They are to be known as the most insignificant people on the planet. And these people have been mocking Job. The audacity. The audacity that they would mock Job. They're the worst. They're like the child predator whose inmate is a serial killer, where even the murderers look down on the pedophiles. They are the lowest of lows. And they are the ones mocking Job. The righteous man who is, yes, suffering, but suffering undeservedly, innocently, right? And so this is what Job is thinking about. Look at who's in my life. You ever do that? Just think about how can you say that, right? That's what Job is thinking. And he moves on from the audacity of who is talking to him to the insult of what they say, verses 9 to 15. The insult of the what? And now I have become their song. I am a byword to them. They abhor me. They keep aloof from me. They do not hesitate to spit at the sight of me. Because God has loosed my cord and humbled me, they have cast off restraint in my presence. On my right hand the rabble rise. They push away my feet. They cast up against me their ways of destruction. They break up my path. They promote my calamity. They need no one to help them. As through a wide breach they come. Amid the crash they roll on. Terrors are turned upon me. My honor is pursued as by the wind. My prosperity has passed away like a cloud. So he's given attention to who is mocking him. Now he gives attention to what the people say, what these mockers are saying. He says, they've made up a song for me. Top of the charts. They've made a dirge, a mournful song insulting Job. Job is a byword. His very name has become synonymous with suffering. They keep away from him. They keep away from him. This would be like lepers crying out, unclean, unclean, to a God-fearing rabbi. He's not unclean. You're unclean. So, the hypocrisy here. They keep aloof from him. They do not hesitate to spit at the sight of him. Utter sign of disgrace. It's amazing how spitting is still considered just utter disgraceful. This has happened, says verse 11, because God has loosed his cord. There's a couple different explanations of what that may mean in my opinion, although I by no means die on this hill. God has pulled out his tent pole. The friendship of God has been on Job's tent, right? Earlier in the book we've heard that. And now God has loosed his tent cord and his dwelling has come in on himself. Now these aren't like little REI tents, of course, just little fiberglass poles. Like, these are dwellings. Poles falling in, crushing those who would be in the home, in the tent. They've cast off restraint. They have no bounds. They have no bounds of insult. Whereas before, people would rise in the presence of great Job, now the rabble rise. He is among the rabble. They push away his feet, and they, kind of a weird Hebrew expression, but they cast against Job their ways of destruction. They bring upon calamity. They promote Job's calamity, and they come, verse 14, as through a wide breach. Job is pictured, Job is a city, and he has a protection, a wall among his city. The only means of protection back then, really, unless you have fortified men, armored men. And a wide breach has occurred into the city, so that they just come wave upon wave. The armies of these deplorables just come into him, and they ransack him, and they just terrorize him. They profit from his downfall like a vulture seeing a kill. And his prosperity, your Bible might actually have a different word, might even have salvation. It would be just as accurate to have salvation there in verse 15 for prosperity, but his salvation has passed away. Job's prosperity has gone away. It has passed away like a cloud. It's not coming back. The wind has driven it. And now what is left is just terrors. This is just the insults of the what? This is what Job is feasting on. This is what he's eating. What do you think about when you're under trial? What goes over in your head on replay over and over and over again? I can't believe that person said that. That was so hypocritical. And they just stew on it and just stew on it and forever and ever. And that's what Job's doing. And you know what it's doing? Nothing good. It's making life more miserable. If you want to be miserable, focus on who's insulting you and focus on what they are insulting you with. Solomon says, death and power are in the life of the tongue. And so their words pierce Job, hurt Job, only worse than their suffering. And at the outset of the book, we saw what tragedy fell upon Job. His children died. His livestock's gone. They were raided. Lightning, fire burned up. His great, wonderful, pristine, green grass estate is just burnt to a crisp. Didn't do. But as we read the book, we realize that's not just it. There's been more and more tragedy, and case in point is mockers who come along like vultures just to peck away at Job. And he is focusing on this, and he's becoming more miserable. There have been moments in the book of Job where there is exemplary behavior. Things that we would model our life after. Chapter 30 is not one of those. So thirdly, we see the silence of the how. We saw the audacity of the who, the insult of the what, and now the silence of the how. Job turns his attention to God for the rest in verses 16 to 31, but just to focus on 16 to 23, how? How can you allow this, God? That is his question. Another question that does not help him. How can you allow this? Again, we come into tragedy and we ask who, what, where, when, why, how. Those aren't necessarily faith questions. So, how can you allow this, God? He says, verse 16. And now my soul is poured out within me. Days of affliction have taken hold of me. The night racks my bones, and the pain that gnaws me takes no rest. With great force my garment is disfigured. It binds me about like the collar of my tunic. God has cast me into the mire, and I have become like dust and ashes. I cry to you for help, but you do not answer me. I stand, and you only look at me. You have turned cruel to me. With the might of your hand, you persecute me. You lift me up on the wind. You make me ride on it, and you toss me about in the roar of the storm. For I know that you will bring me to death and to the house appointed for all living. Yeah, this is not Job's finest hour. How, God, how are you allowing all this to happen to me? My soul is poured out. It is dried up. I have no vitality left in my soul. Days of affliction come upon me, and at night my bones are being gnawed away. The pain of stress, of depression, of physical pain, the boils that he had from chapter 2, all of this has come upon him, and he has no rest. No rest. We shouldn't just glibly go by that. We need rest. Some of us like to take rest at 8 p.m. Other of you crazy people like to be night owls. But we're made to rest. And so Job is experiencing life as he's not supposed to experience it. 18, with great force my garment is disfigured. Garment is just a metaphor for his character. This is all throughout Scripture, but to be clothed, he said earlier in 29:14, I put on righteousness and it clothed me. Righteousness, obviously doesn't have a robe of righteousness. He is righteousness. He is righteous. He's clothed in his character of integrity, right? And in chapter 30, verse 18, by saying, with great force my garment is disfigured, he's saying, my character is gone. I've been stripped of my constitution, my integrity, my loyalty. It's gone. And he even says in verse 18, it binds me about like the collar of my tunic. I'm in a straitjacket, and I'm choking because of my own lack of character. It's Hebrew poetry for this is pretty terrible, pretty hopeless. Worst of all, verse 20, I cry to you for help. So now he's speaking directly to God. I cry to God for help, and you do not answer me. I stand, and you just look at me. And that's the misery of it all. It's not that God doesn't know. It's that he sees and does nothing. That's tragedy. Of course, this is Job's perception. As we will know, towards the end of the book, God's going to correct a few things about Job's thinking. But this is Job's perception. This is Job's feeling about it. Not necessarily true, but this is what it feels like. That God sees me, and he just stands there, and he just looks. And he's disinterested in help. In that sense, 21 says, you have turned cruel to me. With the might of your hand, you persecute me, or very literally, you hold a grudge against me. What are you doing, God? Why are you so against me? You lift me up on this wind, and all you do is you bring me into this powerful thunderstorm, to toss me down to the ground and bring me to death. This is what Job is thinking about. My present circumstances are causing me to view God differently. God has not changed the slightest. He has not changed in the slightest. He doesn't change for you in the slightest. But we so often think, well, let me look at my circumstances. Let me even look at my spiritual life and what is going on there and judge God by that feeble sense. I will make conclusions about God because of my present circumstances. And that is the worst place to be. He is your rock. He is your salvation. He loves his people. And we repay that by sometimes thinking, no, you have a grudge against me. Fourthly and lastly, the disappointment of the why. The disappointment of the why. Verse 24. Yet does not one in a heap of ruins stretch out his hand and in his disaster cry for help? Did not I weep for him whose day was hard? Was not my soul grieved for the needy? But when I hoped for good, evil came. And when I waited for light, darkness came. My inward parts are in turmoil and never still. Days of affliction come to meet me. I go about darkened, but not by the sun. I stand up in the assembly and cry for help. I am a brother of jackals and a companion of ostriches. My skin turns black and it falls from me, and my bones burn with heat. My lyre is turned to mourning, and my pipe to the voice of those who weep. The disappointment of the why. He asks the one question we all ask. Why? Why, Lord, did you allow this to happen? I believe in you. I love you. You love me. You're all powerful. You're wise. You hate evil. Why in the world would you bring undeserved suffering to my life? Why would the innocent ever perish? That's his question here. And he starts with a parallel in verses 24 to 25. If sinners find themselves in trouble and cry for help, and sinners would be inclined to help them, just out of pure common grace mercy, why have you not saved me? You're not worse than us, God. And that's where Job should click. He is not like us. His ways are not our ways. We'll come back to that. But Job says, did I not weep for him whose day was hard? I have been merciful to others. I have wept when others have wept. I have rejoiced when others have rejoiced. Why has not the same been reciprocated to me? I hoped for good and I waited for light, and nothing but evil and darkness came. And then he concludes in 27 to 31, just again, talking about his miserable circumstances and experiences. He calls himself a brother of jackals. Lonely, isolated, carrion-eating, desert animals whose cry sounds like the wailing of a child. He's a companion of ostriches who live lonely, live isolated lives. It's Job against the world. No one wants him. He's worse than the mockers who are the worst of all worsts, the miserables. And true to form, verse 31 says, my lyre is turned to mourning. The song that these mockers have created in verse 9, I have a song too, and I just lament myself. What has this done? Has this done anything good for Job? All of this attention on the who, the what, the how, and the why has not done a single thing to help Job. Believer, I know you don't need me to tell you this, but focusing on your present circumstances and the details of them will not help you in the slightest. You might get like little curls of relief. Oh, we're wrong. Or I am vindicated and that person dies. It will not help you in the long run. Instead, we ought to do what Maurice Roberts said. Understand that what would discourage us are moments, they are occasions of fresh hope and new confidence in the power of God. Simply put, when you come to tragedy, when you come under suffering, you should not think about the circumstances of them, but simply say, Lord, help me believe in the power of God in this moment. Period. Full stop. But I want to fix this. I want to fix this. Yeah, great. Granted, everybody does. But that's not necessarily an act of faith. Faith is to say, this is terrible, but I wonder what God's going to do. I'm over my head. I'm drowning. Something must give. God will act. And I have faith in that. He might act immediately. He might act much later. But he will act. Faith is not just the instrument of our justification. It's not just an instrument of how we become saved. It is our daily quality of life. A trusting, continuous trusting in the Lord. That's what faith is. It is a walk. It is a lifestyle characteristic. Maurice Roberts in this book, who would go on to say, to talk about faith, walking by faith means we must never be influenced primarily by external events, however much these alarm us. Nor must we go by feelings. We go by feelings, and we go by circumstances too much. But walking by faith says we are primarily not influenced by it. We can't help but be influenced by it. We are primarily not, though. Life of faith is to somewhat compartmentalize those things and say, that may be going on, but it's not going to deter me from believing in the Lord. He will do good here. When Daniel was in exile in Babylon, chapter 9 of Daniel, and he says, the 7 years are almost up. I'm going to start praying for rescue, right? That is it. It is an exercise of faith to say, I know who God is. I'm going to pray accordingly. Despite the fact that I have this position, says Daniel, or I was thrown in this den, or thrown in this fire, whatever. I'm going to seek the Lord. I'm going to pray to him as I know him. One who is powerful, one who is loving, one who is merciful. So 2 points of application. What does it mean to live by faith under trial? What does it mean to live by faith under trial? 1, to live by faith in God's grace and power. To live by faith in God's grace and power. Paul says, 3 times I pleaded with the Lord about this, that it should leave me, this thorn of the flesh. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. But that's not the thorn. Fix the thorn, right? That's what Paul's thinking. That's what everybody thinks. I understand your grace is sufficient, but can you get the thorn out of the way? God says, I'll worry about the thorn. Okay. You worry about understanding my grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, Paul goes on and says, I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. For the sake of Christ, then, I am content with weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. For when I am weak, Christian, brothers, sisters, you have to believe. You have to believe. Believe in God's grace and power. We are in the business of making ourselves strong. God is in the business of making ourselves weak. Just surrender. Wave the white flag. He grows you in weakness so that the power of Christ may rest upon you. And we are churning and fighting and trying to stop that. And we're only adding pain to pain. Believe that God's grace is sufficient. It is the most backwards, alien way of thinking. I have a problem, I'm going to ignore it and just say God's way is sufficient. Yeah, that's what God's about. And secondly, live by faith in God's ways and salvation. So, we live by faith in God's grace and His power, and we should also live by faith in God's ways and salvation. This is coming out of that 2 Corinthians 12 passage, but also the entirety of Scripture. This is what the wisest, most loving, most powerful being there is says. I desire to bring something out of nothing. And I am happy to show you that time and time again. And we could actually augment that. God's desire is to bring something wonderful, not just something, but something wonderful out of nothing. How does He create the world? Out of nothing. Right? How does He bring Israel out of genocide and slavery? By His powerful hand. He brings Isaac out of a dead womb of Sarah and Abraham. He brings the church out of a dead nation of Israel. He brings life out of death. And what He likes to do, this is just mind-boggling. He likes to bring you to the point of death so you experience life. But you don't like death. I don't like death. But those are the ways of God. He brings you low in order to exalt you. Who's not deserving of being exalted? For the Christian, the descent of suffering always is followed by an ascent of glory. That is what God does. He does it sometimes in a day. Sometimes He does it over 10 years. He does it in a marriage. He does it with your children. He does it with you. He does it at work. He does it in your salvation. He does it in a variety of ways. But what He is about is bringing you low to glorify you in Christ. And you hate going low. I hate going low. With every fiber of my being, we hate it. But that's what God says is the gospel. I will send my Son, who's the most exalted, glorified, beautiful Son of God. I will consign Him to death of a common criminal, naked, hung on a cross, mocked by the worst. And I will raise Him to life, and all who believe in Him. Live by faith in God's ways and salvation. The way you came to Christ, being humbled in order to be exalted in salvation, is the same repeated, played out scheme God has for your whole entire life, just in various ways. So, don't focus on your circumstances. You will only be more miserable. Instead, believe. Believe in the power of God. Let's pray. Father, your ways are beyond our ways. As the heavens are above the earth, so your ways are beyond ours. Father, forgive us for fighting against your plan of salvation and your way of sanctifying us and making us more Christ-like. But thank you for the reminder that when we dwell on what is before us, what is said about us, who says it, what that means for our relationship with you, how we judge you wrongly in light of it, forgive us for those things. Cause us instead just to have faith. Give us faith to believe in you. Give us grace. Grant us grace that superabounds